was a hypo, and I'm like, welcome to Comics League Movie Night. I am Jared, and I'm here with J. Heat Blaze. What's up, brother?
Flame on. How's everybody doing tonight? Great to be back on movie night for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So today, and what's up, Cameron? Yeah, we're talking about movie night. So we are discussing Batman: The Long Halloween, based on the seminal graphic novel The Long Halloween, written by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. This was one of the times when Jeff Loeb wrote something that wasn't freaking crazy or trying to put to a brother and sister in an incestual relationship. That I'm looking at you, Ultimates. So what's cool about this? So this was the story that this is the first Batman and really only Batman movie in the Tomorrowverse. And I think this was movie 3, I want to say, from the Tomorrowverse.
If you count them as a whole, it was count both parts as a whole. It was 3 and 4 respectively. Yeah,
because you had Superman, JSA, and then Batman, I think.
Yeah.
What's up, yes. Sean Frankham? So what's cool about this, and actually, Jay, you brought up a great point. This did something that I think is a great idea when you're adapting storylines, splitting it into parts. Because here's the thing. Here's the problem with, like, say, Hush. You're cramming so much of that storyline into, like, an hour and a half or, like, an hour movie. And ultimately, you lose a lot.
And I hate to cut you off, Jared. Yeah, this is why, now granted, I know that I got a lot of heat for this when we said this during our DeCamu retrospective. Hush should have just been DeCamu's version of Under the Red Hood. I'm sorry. Based on that structure and the whole twist villain angle, you might as well have gone with Jason Todd.
I mean, you won't get any heat from me because that's pretty much what that story should have been. But Cameron says Long Halloween works as a first Batman movie or even as a Batman trilogy. Here's the thing. If we were living in a world where Crisis was not a trilogy, I would say so. But the problem is when you split it up into a trilogy, particularly when they're like months apart, people forget like plot points from the previous movie and stuff. That's what Crisis ran into. So I'm just saying split it up. But that's why I think 2 is the best, because then you can like let it breathe a little bit, but there's not too much where like by the time you get to the end of the story, people don't forget what happened at the beginning of the story.
Yeah, and this is the only part I'm going to mention about Crisis. Crisis Part 2 felt like Crisis 1.5. If you actually edited Part 1 and cut a lot of the filler, you could have cut both. You could have made Part 1 and 2 into one. Like I've said this in multiple collabs. Part 2 was just pure filler outside of like 3 key scenes.
In terms of Crisis? Yeah, exactly. I think so. That's why, again, it should have been 2 parts of the movie, because really, when you look at it, 2 is like, okay, so what's happening with Psycho Pirate? I'm like, we get it. Move the frick on. But Long Halloween, Barry Cameron says, I say it works as a first movie because, let's be honest, we do not need multiple movies to set up his rogues gallery. At this point, yeah, you don't. Particularly if you're going to use like villains like the Joker or so. I would say if they've had a successful movie, I don't think you need a setup. Like Two-Face, I don't think so, because people still remember The Dark Knight from Christopher Nolan, and that movie like made $1 billion. So it was like a really successful film. So I don't think you need to. Plus, this movie does kind of what Hush does, in that it introduces some villains, but it introduces them in a way that it basically introduces you to the basic premise of the characters. So you don't necessarily need an entire origin story for Poison Ivy. They're like, okay, she's a plant lady. Okay, for the purpose of this movie, that's all we need to know. And so let me ask you this. What did you think of Jensen Ackles as Batman compared to him as like Red Hood? Because I think he made a good Batman.
His Red Hood is better, because at least with Batman, especially because with Batman, you got to play both Batman and Bruce Wayne. Jensen Ackles, he's basically playing his character from Supernatural with Jason Todd. He barely has to change anything.
True that. And yeah, it's essentially. But
he makes for a good Batman, don't get me wrong, but not a good Bruce Wayne. You kind of need the balance.
Corey says, I wish they would do the entire Jeff Loeb Batman trilogy like Dark Victory, One Rome. Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's a little secret that you guys should know. Based upon our conversation with Sam Liu, he said what happens is that WB kind of comes to these guys and says, This story is talked about a lot. Give us a storyline. Give us an animated movie for that. That's kind of how they market it. And here's the problem. The other parts of the Halloween trilogy, if you will, by Jeff Loeb, don't get talked about as much as The Long Halloween. They should be, but they don't. So that's why, if no one's talking about it to a certain degree, WB is not going to authorize a movie for it. Barry Cameron says, I've always said this man should be Batman, and we finally got, we just need live action. I think he could do a pretty decent job as like a young, particularly in like the DCU where they're going for like a younger version of like a lot of these characters. I think that could work, except for Hal Jordan.
Yeah. And
he could have made a pretty decent Hal Jordan.
I mean, yeah, it would have been a bit gruffer compared to other performances, but he could have pulled off Hal Jordan.
Yeah, I would say
maybe Guy Gardner if he really applied himself. Maybe Guy Gardner, because Jensen Ackles, he's got the attitude, but he's not obnoxious.
Yeah, that's why I say Hal Jordan, because Hal Jordan has an attitude, but it's not the obnoxious type of attitude, like you said. It's not the Guy Gardner attitude.
Yeah, but if he was ever challenged to do a Guy Gardner, I think Jensen Ackles could pull it off.
He could do it. He could definitely do it. He could also play a good Captain America. Hint, hint. I had to. That was set up just so well. So this movie, okay. So, Jay Heat, recount for the people the basic plot of The Long Halloween.
The Long Halloween, spoilers ahead, but Long Halloween is I'm not gonna say noir, but it's definitely a detective story where someone is unaliving key figures in Falcone's mob. And it's this overarching mystery where they're being targeted over the course of multiple holidays. And it kind of leads to like how they're known as the holiday killer. Calendar Man becomes a red herring. It's a whole thing. But at least in this, again, it's been a while since I've read the original graphic novel, so I could be wrong if they were added details here. But to make it a long story short, it was Harvey Dent's estranged wife, Gilda, who wanted revenge on the Falcone for what happened to her when she was pregnant with Alberto's child, because they hooked up and got together out of wedlock. Falcone found out about it. She was abducted. Alberto did not stand up to his father to defend her, and it was a whole thing. And then when all said and done, you get the Two-Face origin in the latter half, or part 2, and then in Casablanca fashion, Harvey Dent takes the fall for her. And then Bruce just like, okay, just leave town.
All right, so that works. And yeah, so they should adopt Tom King's Wonder. No, they should not adopt that. No,
you're just trying to stir the pot. Come on,
I know. I've always said okay. I should do that. All right, but so it's also basically the origin story for Two-Face, and this is post-crisis, right?
I believe so. Long Halloween is dated post-crisis. Yes.
So then, let's see what else. I'm aware I can be comedic, Corey. I appreciate that, brother. But so the other thing that this really shows a lot is the Batman-Catwoman relationship. Now, kind of an interesting fact about this: the actress that played Catwoman died in between movies.
Yep.
At least the thing was in between parts, I think, right?
In between. I think I want to say it was closer to post-production on part 2, but I can't confirm that for certain.
I think at least they had recorded her lines for part 2, right?
Yes.
All right, so that's why. Unfortunately, she died via drowning, so R.I.P. But I felt that like the Batman-Catwoman relationship in this was great, particularly when Bruce goes to Wayne Tower to take out his villains, and all of a sudden Catwoman comes in and it's a Batcat fight, in which you could kind of say here that this Batcat relationship was written better than Tom King. Cameron says, I also like this movie because it shows the fall of mob crime and the rise of yeah, that's actually a really good point. I'm going to leave this up as a matter of fact, because when you think about because this is taking place early in Batman's career, and at this point you start to like because previous to this, Batman was fighting like more mob villains, and then all of a sudden, as was like indicated in like Dark Knight, kind of when Alfred says like this stuff sort of inspires, essentially he basically implies like Batman inspired the Joker, essentially. So this kind of gets into the point where we stop seeing more of the organized crime and more of the supervillains, which organized crime still exists in Gotham, but it's less of a focus, particularly in Batman stories, than it is like when Joker or Poison Ivy does something.
Pretty much. And for any, since we're making jabs at Tom King, like I've said in multiple shows, in terms of if you're going to treat Batman and Catwoman, all that in a vacuum, it was not that bad. The editorial stuff and the setup for 5G was atrocious. But if you to completely remove that, the run itself was not that bad. It just fell off a cliff because of the editorial stuff.
Particularly after 50. So it was like, oh, man. Because according to what my friend Robert, because Robert had him on there to talk about Batman, he talked about the marriage thing. This is the one thing I'm not very certain of. I think I remember him saying that the not doing the marriage bait and switch was actually King.
Yeah, he did the bait and switch with the wedding, but in terms of actually unaliving Alfred and keeping him unalived, yeah, that was
editorial. I'm really hoping that Steve Trevor's death is editorial and they keep him dead for like a long time because he kind of deserves it.
He's got to get brought back by the next crisis. Like we know. This is
I know, but can that be like years down the line and keep him dead? That'd be very appreciative.
Wait, didn't we just have Dark Crisis last year?
Yeah, so there's no way they're going to do another Crisis a year later. Hey, guys, love the Long Halloween. It's Batman in his essence and prime. Also, what a plot twist. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. This is a quintessential Batman movie. And, you know, it's kind of funny. Despite the fact that it has villains like Poison Ivy and Solomon Grundy, it is pretty grounded with the way it approaches stuff, which is why it makes sense that this was one of the inspirations for Chris Nolan's universe. Also adding on that involves like a lot of organized crime. So I guess that makes sense. That makes sense.
I will say there's one hiccup and that it was Gilda of all people. And even if you're factoring what happened with her pregnancy by the mob, why did she wait so long to make her move? And why did Falcone not suspect it was her? Again, the point is the mystery is Bruce's early use. He's a detective or learning how to be a detective while working with Commissioner Gordon, and the overall mystery of it and how it all ties back to Harvey Dent. Gilda's kind of the surprise twist at the end. So what happens to her, again, I can't. Jared tries to keep things PG, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But given what happened to Gilda, that wasn't the main focus. Harvey was. So if you're wondering, if you feel like the Gilda reveal is a bit contrived, from an organic standpoint, yes. But in terms of the overall mystery, no, it's just a last minute twist. That's really all.
How about Josh Duhamel as Harvey Dent / Two-Face? I gotta
solid
say,
performance. I could not. Solid performance.
I gotta say that is not bad at all. Like, wow, you really nailed it. Barry Giratina says, wonder why the people who made the 2-part animated movie killed off Alberto Falcone instead of having him be exposed as Holiday and locked him up with the Calendar Man. I thought they didn't.
I think Alberto was the Holiday kill in the original story, if I remember correct.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he was still killed on the boat.
Oh yeah, he still was.
Yeah, okay, that's weird. But
I feel like in the original version, Alberto started first, and then Gilda played copycat. At least from what I'm interpreting, just offhand. I know I'm making a Grant Morrison out of myself right now because again, I haven't read the storyline.
Making a Grant Morrison out of yourself. God damn, that's so good.
Because it's been at least 5 years since I've read The Long Halloween. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest.
That works. Cameron says, yeah, Long Halloween did what the Hush couldn't do. And by the way, Legion says, best Batman movies, Mask of the Phantasm, no debate. Long Halloween Part 1 was great. Part 2 didn't slap as hard, though. True. And of course, best animated Batman movie is Phantasm. We all know that. I consider The Long Halloween to be the blueprint of Reeves' Batman. Yeah, it kind of is, too. That's part of why I bought it, was when Reeves brought up the 3 books that, like, inspired his Batman. It was, if I remember correctly, it was Year One, Long Halloween, and then Ego.
Pretty much.
I still have to get Ego, though. But
you've never read Batman Ego?
No, I've never read that. I need to. Giratina says in the comics he was, just that they had him killed off at the end of the first part of the animated movie.
Okay, thank you for confirming that, Sergeant. Thank you.
I figured. So then, again, so we get to part 1, and then the basic idea of the Holiday Killer is he commits a killing on every holiday, and it's like themed around like the specific holiday. And at first you have characters that like factor in there, like Calendar Man, Solomon Grundy factors into that, and it's basic. This is basically a mob story, and see, that's one of the reasons why I think Batman works so well as a character and why so many people have like latched onto him as opposed to like Superman or Wonder Woman, is that with Batman you can just have him fight the mob because he's just a dude with gadgets. That's it. So then, hang on. Then, oh, by the way, Jay, do you remember the new 52 reinvention of Calendar Man, where like he basically dies every year, and then like he hardens, and then he emerges as a new Calendar Man.
Yeah, that lasted one story arc and was quickly abandoned. I'm like, what are we doing? Is this a rift on Happy New Year? Like, where are we going with this?
Remember, this was also the run where they established that Batman clones his body like all the times we can be in peak physical condition of Batman, and no one has touched that ever since. And I'm like, yeah, because that's kind of confusing and stupid. But that was their way of trying to say that like everything that's happened to Batman has actually happened. It's just it's another clone body. But even I'm like, that still is kind of weird, guys. But it's DC. They're known for having a lot of weird stuff. But so then some other stuff that we really have with this is, again, so we see a lot of the mental degradation of Two-Face where he starts to like up in his mind. And again, I want to give props to Josh Duhamel, the way he also does the more gruff Two-Face voice in addition to the more hopeful Harvey Dent voice. It is superb the way he voice acts.
The guy has range for a character that's effectively split down the middle, no pun intended. He had range. I have to commend him. He had range. I cannot take that.
So you could say, so you could say, Jay Heath, that with him everything is black and white.
I like to think it more as cut and dry, but you get the idea.
You know what I'm saying. There you go. But so this movie also, so it's kind of funny, is when you get to Crisis. I think it's part 2. When they show the origin of the Justice League, the post-credit scene of this is shown because it's Batman, it's Alfred opening the door, and there's Flash and Green Arrow, and then Alfred goes, "Sir, it's for you," because at the time Superman is poisoned, so they need Batman to unpoison him, and this is how like they formed the League.
And
I felt was, yeah, go ahead.
We know Catwoman's actress tragically passed away between parts, R.I.P. But Selena never played a larger role in the Tomorrowverse arc again. Again, I will go into a video about this, cheap plug, I promise. But to where the Tomorrowverse was more of a series of transition projects, trying to wipe the slate clean, leading up to Crisis. So yeah, but Selena, outside of that post-credit scene, she's never seen again in any Tomorrowverse project. I don't even think she appears in Crisis.
No, she's referenced, but she's not like brought up. It's like Helena Wayne brings her up because she's like, "Oh, I'm the daughter of Batman and Catwoman," and all that. But no, she never like. I don't think she even appears as a background character at any point. Maybe a version of her shows up, and maybe I'm just forgetting. But as far as I know, she wasn't in any of the parts for Crisis. But it's pretty good. Now, let me ask you this again. This is a criticism that the Tomorrowverse always gets, is the animation style and how it looks really cheap. I think in this movie, since it's less about like explosions and less like super stuff, I think this may be a little better than like maybe the art style and like animation style fits better here than like in like, let's say, Crisis or any of that. What do you think?
I definitely agree with that notion because art direction, animation are completely different. Contrary to various misconceptions, art direction and animation are very different. They still apply in an overarching product, but they couldn't be no more different in concept. The art direction, this does work with this more Archer-like art style. It does work for like grounded storytelling like Long Halloween because for all intents and purposes, it's a detective mob story. You don't need a whole lot. Whereas for like Superman, Man of Tomorrow, Supergirl, and the Legion, I mean, it is a cost cutting measure to use that style, but you could probably, a little more oomph because
Yeah.
it's because to a casual, it can come across as cheap. It's one thing if it's a stylistic choice, but yeah, for the majority of these movies, they do kind of look cheap, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, yeah, that's true, and yeah, you do make a good point on that, and because I think at this point, animation was slashed. I mean, the
Budget.
budget was slashed for this because yeah, because they didn't know exactly what this was going to look like, what DC animation was going to be later, and that's why they like ended with Crisis, like when they did, because originally there was going to be like a lot more movies, mainly involving Wonder Woman, which was great. And by the way, I'm calling it next week. We're talking about Justice Society World War II, so we're going to talk about that. But I think the issue that I at least noticed with this is yeah, it looks cheap, but I think for what it's trying to do and with the resources available, I think it makes the most of what it has.
I agree.
Yeah, and now where does this rank, do you think, among the other Tomorrowverse movies?
Long Halloween acts as arguably two of the best films, especially if you combine them into one. But as a whole, I give Long Halloween an 8.
Parts 1 and 2 combined?
1 and 2 combined an 8.
Okay, that works. I would give it an 8 as well. Probably maybe an 8.5 a little bit with what it's able to do. But yeah, an 8 is about the fair part when where we see that. But so in terms of, so let's do this. Let's do a little let's do this. All right, so Jay Heat, now tell the audience why you picked Long Halloween.
The reason I picked Long Halloween is because one, it is an adaptation of one of the best Batman stories ever. So
Preach.
I'll go ahead and establish that right there. Second, you actually do get to see Jensen Ackles as Batman, which is a very notorious fan casting. So, I mean, all the more, good favor by Warner Brothers Discovery, all things considered. But more importantly, this is just my favorite out of the entire whole Tomorrowverse debacle. This was just a genuine good movie. I had no critiques, except maybe the change with Gilda. But again, it's a twist villain, since a lot of the Tomorrowverse villain movies had a quote unquote twist villain. The only one that didn't have one was maybe Man of Tomorrow, but that's because Parasite was so bloody obvious.
I could say that.
But other than that, other than Man of Tomorrow, this is like the only, even as a two-parter, this is the only one that didn't have a twist villain.
True that. Now, the other thing I'm going to bring up is, I'm going to say this. This is 100% like, well, not 100%. They still changed some stuff, but I think that this is an extremely faithful adaptation of the comic. Like, to a T, I think this did a fantastic job of this.
Yes, and for those in the comments who are confused when I say that, guys, Gilda was a twist villain for this movie. In the original story, it was Alberto. Yes, but in part one, they spent a huge amount of time setting up Gilda's motivation and her relation with Alberto. There's even a throwaway line about when Harvey gets agitated about him being compared to Alberto in her previous relationship. I'm not saying the twist isn't there. I'm just saying it's set up. But Gilda's, it's more set up. Like, take Legion of Superheroes, for example. Mon-El comes completely out of nowhere, and why would a Daxamite be working for Brainiac?
That's a good point.
You see what I'm saying? Like, come on.
That is that was the part of that where I'm like, what? It's because, as far as I know, has Mon-El ever really been a villain?
I mean, maybe he's been like an anti-hero in certain storylines, but I mean, even then, he's like bordering hero and anti-hero. He's never been full-scale villain.
Yeah, that's the problem in like a lot of these Tomorrowverse movies, is they took a bit of they made a lot of really weird character choices to the point where I'm like, wait a minute here. This doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's one of those things where I do wish that these are some of the occasions where I wish they did put a little bit more effort into these movies, because I'm like, we already know that. Oh, by the way, guess who wrote this movie? Tim Sheridan.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, that's very interesting there. I was about to say Supergirl, but he wasn't a villain there either, so never mind. I mean, he wasn't the villain, but he was a henchman of the villain, and I'm like, wait, what? That was when I was like, well, that's odd.
I appreciated the nostalgia because a lot of I know we're talking about Legion of Superhero, but just bear with me for this brief segment. But it definitely felt like that one episode of JLU where Supergirl is presumed KIA, but she just chose to stay in the future to be with Brainy or Brainiac 5. This definitely felt like a glorified callback to that episode, just made into an hour and a half. And I'm just like, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I appreciate the references here. But especially if you're going to make Mon-El a twist villain or henchman for the Circle, this does not work in context or in execution. Like this twist doesn't work at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's a interesting choice for that, and it's one of those things where I'm like, why would you do this? Why would you do this? But anyway, so let's go to a little Q&A thing, and then we can wrap up. But anyway, so Q&A. Anything you guys want to know about the Tomorrowverse, DC Animation, Marvel Animation, whatever. Ask us any question you would like to know the answer to.
As long as it's not a repeat question.
Yeah, as long as it's not a repeat question. Like, you can ask us what the meaning of life is, and the answer is comics. Or what our favorite DC animated movies are. You can ask us whatever questions you would like to know the answer to it. Again, to quote Jahid, as long as it's not a repeat question, because otherwise, yeah. Let's see. What is your least favorite part of the movie? Jahid, you go first.
Okay, if I had to count both parts as a whole, my least favorite, and I know this was part of the original comic, where Bruce gets bewitched by Poison Ivy's pheromones. That was just such a poor place in the boot to end part one, like structurally.
You could have done it after Catwoman saves them, and then have the consequences be the start of part two. But yeah, that is kind of jarring.
Yeah, because then all of a sudden, and then we start part two, like, oh, it's been a couple of months. He's been bewitched by Poison Ivy by all this time, and she didn't even bother going for his fortune or assets. Like, if she's been pulling this con, why did it take Bruce 2 to 3 months straight for Ivy to pretty much leave Bruce broke?
Mm-hmm.
And if Selena did think something was afoot, why did she like see? I know it's a part of the original storyline, but again, that is the poorest place structure-wise to end part one.
Yeah, it really is. For me, yeah, I got to say that, because I'm like, wait a minute. So it takes her that long to get to Bruce and realize something's up, even though she knows Bruce pretty well at this point. I'm like, wait a minute, something here doesn't line up.
Because in the original story, there was a time gap because of the holiday the whole holiday unaliving thing. There is a time skip over the course of the story arc, but it's no more than like 2 or 3 months. Mm-hmm. It's like it just skips to the next major holiday. That's really all it does.
Yeah, and that works. It's just like, I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, you could have had Selena swoop in to save Bruce from Ivy's pheromone / mind control, have him piece together that he lost some money or he did some nefarious things under Ivy's control, and then have that be the ending stinger going into part two. Mm-hmm. I mean, an extra 5 minutes would have improved part one by a lot.
Yeah, I also think the real motivation to split this movie into 2 parts was because they knew they weren't going to get that many more movies. So they're like, let's just split it so we can say we got more movies in the Tomorrowverse than we actually did.
Yeah, because if you don't count the multi-parters, it's technically 7.
And that's not that. How much did the DCAMU get?
15.
Yeah, so if you count the multi-parters, let's see, that adds 4 more movies.
11.
So, yeah, 11 movies. I could see why you want to do that.
Hold on. I guess the obscure Batman villains would stay obscure and goofy. Okay, a lot of those obscure villains are either Silver Age or early Bronze / post-Crisis villains.
Yeah, like Condiment King.
And he's mostly played up for a gag. The only ones that really got revamped into the modern day were Mr. Freeze and Kite Man.
Hell yeah.
Obviously. And those are the only ones that got a major revamp. Harley was an original character. Hugo Strange stayed relatively the same. And I think Hugo Strange is a Golden Age villain, technically. or at least he was retconned into one.
I think technically, yeah.
Yeah, so Hugo Strange, you wouldn't even have to change a whole lot with him. Joker debuted in 1942, 1941. It was I know it was in the golden age when Joker debuted. But yeah, there's not that many Silver Age villains that either get modernized or played up for a gag. There's not that many pertaining to Batman. A lot of Wonder Woman's villains are modern or Silver Age, or at least when they debuted in the Silver Age. A lot of Superman villains. But with Batman, everyone just either got revamped closer to the modern day, got revamped post-crisis, or stayed relatively the same. There are not that many.
Cameron asks, what do you guys think about Troy Baker voicing the Joker from now on? I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think he has a solid Joker voice.
Yeah, it's a bit of a downgrade going from him to Mark Hamill to him in Arkham Origin. But other than that, I mean, you're comparing a legend to I mean, come on, it's peak Mark Hamill. So I'm sorry, I was gonna make that comparison regardless. But yeah, Troy Baker's a pretty good Joker. So for all things considered.
Yeah, particularly with this, because the problem with him voicing him in Arkham Origins is that like you said, he's competing with like Mark Hamill, and there's no competing with Mark Hamill. But it's like with this, no, he is this Joker, so it really works it gives his Joker voice
a unique
time to breathe. Yeah, it's allowed to be on its own without being constantly compared to another. I mean, there'll still be people that compare it, but there's less of a comparison. Like, oh my gosh, how does he get from that to the Mark Hamill voice later? Same thing with like when they had Roger Craig Smith as Batman in Arkham Origins, and then you go from Arkham Origins to Arkham Asylum with Kevin Conroy.
Which Roger Craig Smith wasn't too bad of a Batman, especially those early years, Arkham Shadow, that pure vengeance. So it wasn't so much he was a bad Batman, is that Roger Craig Smith wasn't a good Bruce Wayne. That's really the major issue.
Well, because remember, back at that point in Batman's career, he wasn't really emphasizing the Bruce Wayne part of his persona.
That's what I'm saying. But if you talk about casuals and Arkham versus diehards, that's the main thing they're going to say, is that Roger Craig was a pretty decent Batman. He just wasn't a good Bruce Wayne.
Which I think if he replaced Conroy as the Batman in the next Arkham game, even if it takes place after Suicide Squad, I think with a little bit more voice direction, because you can tell he's obviously playing younger Batman. That's probably what they were telling him to do. So I think if he were told to play an older Batman, I think that it could probably do that. Or the guy that voiced Batman in Young Justice, I think did a pretty stand-up job. Who voiced Batman in Young Justice?
Bruce Greenwood.
Greenwood, yeah. I think here's the thing: if they cast Bruce Greenwood, I've long said that I think that would be a good one to replace Conroy, because he sounds similar enough to Kevin that I think that would be an easier transition for fans, as opposed to like going to someone that sounds like nothing like Batman. By the way, Cameron says, also remind me if I'm wrong, but Tomorrow vs. Batman is the one that gave up Dick Grayson, right? Because if so, that's the Houston. Yeah, he didn't adopt Dick Grayson and make him Robin. This one didn't. The one in Crisis that we meet, that was like the Earth 2 Batman, or like a different Batman.
Yeah, and he was already presumed unalived prior to Crisis. But,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it was an aesthetic thing, because there was really no breathing room for Grayson, and this was amalgamation. And I hate using this term, but this is just an amalgamation of transition projects to set the stage in case DC animation got cut, got rearranged, got recalibrated budgeting wise, or if James Gunn's DCU gets off the ground. If you want a purely logistical, right down the middle answer, Tomorrowverse was just a series of transition projects. That's really all it was. And there was no breathing room for Nightwing at all, if we're really being honest.
Yeah, that's kind of true. And that's well, here's the thing. They did pick the right story if they're not going to have Nightwing, because Nightwing was not in The Long Halloween, as far as I know, or even Robin. There were no Robins in Long Halloween.
Robin's in Dark Victory, which is a sequel to Long Halloween, but in the original story, no, Grayson had not officially become Robin yet.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was probably the best option for them to go with in terms of story, if they wanted to keep it very small scale and everything. And that's the other thing about this story that works really well, is that it is very like small scale. It's compared to like other Batman stories they could have done, I think.
I agree.
But let's see. So what do you? So in terms of the next episode, what other questions do you guys have? It could be about this question, DC
Any
in
new
general.
direction verse question? Any new direction verse questions you might have for us?
Yeah, exactly. New direction verse. Let's go.
Because I remember my second playthrough on Batman the Telltale series, which is canonical to our new direction verse, by the way. The second playthrough, the one that has new direction by it, just for the sake of clarity. But yeah, those were actually pretty successful. So I know at least y'all were at least intrigued by the prospect.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you want to ask, like how would I include Tiffany Fox in the Bat family? Like just whatever you guys want to ask.
Yeah, any question that you guys could possibly want to know regarding regarding New Direction verse, even Shelter verse, whatever you want to know. Let's see. What other questions do you guys have that you could possibly want to know in terms of like also maybe how we would kick Tom King off of Wonder Woman, or Tom King would not, if we ran DC, Tom King would not work at DC, or at least in the comics direction. But what else do we have for questions? Well, I have a question in a new direction. Was how many Batman rogues have gone straight or reformed? I don't think we've done that yet.
The only one I guess you could argue we did was, because we did have Bruce because we did set up Bruce Wayne getting infected by poisonizing pheromones and unaliving Joker. So we did set that up. Harley kinda, if the timeline video is going by, we're at least setting up the idea. We just haven't made an official video for it yet, where Harley does go straight for her daughter. But Poison Ivy, I don't think we allowed her to be reformed. I think we just threw her back in Arkham.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, we could do more of that if that's what you guys like.
Want, but I mean, I wouldn't mind it. It's just those are the main three I know specifically. And I'll give an official explanation for that right now. The reason we had it this way is because one of the biggest critiques in Batman stories is the over reliance on Joker. And even White, I mean, and I'm just like, it's almost as if every storyline is just filler till the next Joker fighter or when Joker breaks out again. So now we have a setting like Batman's indisposed. Bruce is currently being leveraged into Task Force X by Waller. How would that look like? Kind of a Gotham Knights scenario, just not as contrived and not reduced to a glorified life service game, but that's besides the point.
Well, compared to like Suicide Squad, I think that Gotham Knights was lacking in the live service elements, and I think that's a plus in it. By the way, so I got two questions. So Cameron asked, because I was about to ask, Mr. Freeze and Two-Face at this point should be healed in my opinion. We could do that.
Yeah.
All right, so Daniel says, what do you guys think about the first Death of Superman anime movie versus the Duhamel?
Oh, the Duhamel one is way better.
The Duhamel one is way better. I'll give you that. It doesn't add the stupid clone thing. But like this way, neither movies are good. One is better than the other. I'll give you that.
But it is not a perfect adaptation by any means.
No, yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, that Justice League would kick Doomsday's ass. But of the two, which one am I watching more? The Duhamel one for sure. Even though it blasts Super Wonder.
I can forgive the copyright. I can forgive the copyright issues with Superboy going off the first one. I can forgive that. I can forgive Superman Doomsday being the first DC animated original movie. Thank you, DC animated original movie in that catalog. What I can't forgive is that you tried to cram not Brainiac.
Bizarro?
Not Bizarro. Well, they made him into Bizarro, but you know what I'm trying to say. Connor Kent, the Eradicator, basically combined them together, and then had Luthor kind of make this de facto clone army. And then all of a sudden, we have a brief fighting scene where Luthor is just wailing on said clone with kryptonite gauntlets, and I'm just like, yeah.
Begun. The Clone War has. Have you ever heard the tragedy of Tom King, the idiot?
All I'm saying is Doomsday was a disaster.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, but when you compare, the other one tells a coherent story, even though it still crams in a lot of BS. And see, you can't do the death of Superman with that Justice League, because that Justice League is the one that should have shown up in the death of Superman.
I think in the original story, I think JLI was still active at the time.
JLA was still active. This is what killed them, because they got their asses kicked by Doomsday. Yeah, and I'm like, if only the real Justice League had shown up. Cameron says, speaking of Doomsday, aren't they making him talk again? That's not Doomsday. That's the Time Trapper, and the Time Trapper can assume the identity of like other people, but still talk. At least according to Robert. That's what he.
And what's up, Woodgoff? But yeah, Superman Doomsday again. I would have pushed that film back until after the copyright stuff with the whole Superboy copyright with the Siegel estate was resolved. I just would have pushed the film back because that was not worth seeing the light of day.
No, absolutely not.
It was so bad. What saved the DC animated original catalog was The New Frontier, Darwin Cook's story, perfect adaptation. Like,
yep, perfect.
Printed off the page.
They changed a few of the lines, but for the most part, yeah, it works.
And the notorious Under the Red Hood adaptation of 2010. If not for those two movies, the animated original movie catalog would have crashed and burned.
Yeah, because yeah, and you wouldn't have gotten Superman, Batman, Supergirl, Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, Wonder Woman 2009. You wouldn't have gotten all the really good adaptations, or at least the ones that were good enough. And by the way, Cameron says, thank God, because having Doomsday speak is always a bad thing. Well, they did something called the Doomsday Wars, I think, which is after the death of Superman and after he has come back and everything like that, where Doomsday returns and he talks, but because he's being puppeted by Brainiac. And this was Dan Jurgens going, oh my gosh, no, you see, if the Justice League showed up, they would have gotten their asses kicked too. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the difference. At that point, that you had him being mind controlled by Brainiac. Of course, he's gonna be a better fighter.
Not to mention, you have a bunch of C-listers and a few B heroes. I will be fair, going up against a hulking behemoth that could rival the Incredible Hulk. What are they going to do? You have Booster Gold, the Martian Manhunter's other identity. I forget the actual name of it. It's Hawk something. And Fire and Ice. You had the majority of leftovers from the JLI in this story going up against a rampaging Doomsday half across America. What in God's name are they gonna do?
Exactly, and that's why it that's one of my problems with the death of Superman is that it's an extremely contrived story, and I'm like, but part of it is because it's majorly the story that Dan Jurgens is known for, so he keeps hammering that whenever he writes Superman. So I'm like, you're a one-trick pony, dude. But there you go. See ya, Garatina. See you later.
Have a good one, Sergeant.
But yeah, it's strange. But yes, exactly. Now, let me ask you this, Jay Heat. Which one's better, Death or Reign of the Superman? Ooh. I think Reign.
Ooh, are we counting the movies or are we counting the original comic?
Movies.
The movies, yeah, I would say Reign is
because they took the essential elements. They cut out the Death of Cosetti thing because they know they're not going to have time to do an Emerald Twilight movie. Even though I would have loved a DeCamu Green Lantern movie, but still, it's like, okay, I can see what you're going with that.
There was no time for it, and you could argue that subplot didn't even need to be there. It was just to set up Emerald Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was just no room for it. I guess if I had to really nitpick Reign, I mean, Death's laid all the stakes. I mean, Clark and Lois getting together, the Dread, the Justice League getting whooped. All of it was there.
There is a lot of dread of Clark and Lois getting together.
Dude, you got a throwaway line. Not many
throwaway line I don't want.
What do you want? A proper Superman Wonder Woman movie referencing
at least a short 5? At least a short that would be like, okay, so they broke up, or don't even break them up. Do something original with the death of Superman. But no, you had to be lazy.
I'm just gonna say this: if you actually had a Superman Wonder Woman movie specifically referencing Volume 5 of that book,
it wouldn't have been. I hope it wouldn't have been Volume 5.
I mean, that's where the breakup happens in Volume 5.
No, don't do the breakup. Don't do the breakup.
Hey, I'm speaking logistically, man, because they have to set. Because if you're gonna adapt Death of Superman,
no, I don't adapt anything by Tomasi. And god damn it, I said another person that's on this list.
Why did you say that name?
Dang it! God damn you, Jay Heat! You made me say his name. You made me invoke his name.
How did Voldemort get into this?
Blame DC for hiring so many people who must not be named.
Oh man!
Yeah, that's right. Laugh it up. Laugh it up, Chuckle Hut. Laugh it up. Enjoy my pain, sir. Enjoy my pain.
That's not why I'm laughing, man. That's not why I'm laughing.
Enjoy my pain, sir. You're the one that made me think of Volume 5 of Superman and Wonder Woman.
Hey, look, only in that context, specifically in that context, because whether this was from an editorial standpoint, whether this was for synergy, it was not going to stick. They were going to pair Clark and Lois back. So would you rather have the throwaway line, or would you rather have a whole movie/short of
movie/short, because at least it doesn't seem like an afterthought.
All right, that's all I was asking.
Yeah, because the other one just seems lazy. They're like, oh, by the way, they're broken up now, and I'm like, what? Or like Lois has been with him for so long, but she hasn't seen without the glasses. Jay Heat, here's how she reveals. Here's how he reveals identity. Lois, I'm Superman. And then Lois legit goes, how could I have not seen it? And I'm like, yeah, how could you have not seen it, Miss Pulitzer Prize winning reporter that only got it because you were covering your husband because you're an immoral D-bag?
Well, at least it's better than personally endangering herself to prove a point.
Oh, she did that many times. Again, she is a lame character. Very, very lame.
Yeah, second Warner Brothers.
I wanted to put that in there. Yes, you know me, Thoth. You know me. But yeah, so there's a lot in there, which I'm like, But so I think it's safe to say next week, because it's my pick, we'll be covering Justice Society World War II. In other words, the Wonder Woman movie in the Duhamel. By the way, what does that say? That the Wonder Woman movie in the Duhamel, I mean the Tomorrowverse. I mean Tomorrowverse.
I was about to say we covered Bloodlines.
No, we didn't. We skipped that one.
I thought we covered Bloodline.
No, we ranted about it and we discussed it with Sam Liu.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I may have to have Sam on when we inevitably talk about Bloodlines. But anyway, so we get to so what's the word? Oh yeah. So we're gonna cover Justice Society World War II because we want to do. By the way, one of the top infuriating moments of the Death Superman is when Clark prefers a woman that doesn't even know him so well as Diana did in shows. Yeah, exactly. But so we're gonna cover Justice Society World War II. So as I said, what does that say? That compared to the James Gunn verse, yes, I'm gonna use this as a gun dig. The Wonder Woman movie came in movie 2, not 1, not 3, not 5, not 11, not 13, 2. Dose.
Technically, Wonder Woman Bloodlines was movie 14, but I'll let you have that.
No. Compared to that, instead of 14, 2. It gets even worse, Jay Heap. First 3 movies of the Tomorrowverse: Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman. The way it should be.
Okay, all right. Justice Society is an ensemble that has.
It's a Wonder Woman movie, dude. Don't take this away
Flash
from me.
Is in there too, man. Flash.
It was supposed to be a Wonder Woman movie. Ask Brit. It was a Wonder Woman movie. You always must take away everything I care about. Must you, Jay Heat? Must you?
Oh man,
You're enjoying yourself, aren't you, Chuckles?
Oh man,
You're really enjoying yourself, aren't you, Chuckles? Hey, what's up, Sherry?
What's up, Sherry? Okay. Okay. I'm done.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Laugh it up. Laugh it up.
I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah, you must always take this away from me. It was a Wonder Woman movie. A pretty good Wonder Woman movie, by the way. But But yeah, so we're gonna cover Just Society World War II because I think that was one of the more enjoyable Tomorrowverse movies. And I think that to me that's the better one because it brings in so many different concepts there. Yeah, Max says there was concept art in the original title was Wonder Woman and the JSA, and we were supposed to get other movies after that, like maybe a trilogy of animated movies based on that. So there is that. But again, you may be wondering, Jared, why didn't DC do that? Because DC hates Wonder Woman. Yep, I said it. You know how I know they hate Wonder Woman? They put Tom King on Wonder Woman. That's how you know they hate a character. That's how you know the character of the week that they hate. Because when Tom King writes them, he writes them completely out of character.
What about the Strange Adventures? That was a pretty good book by Tom King. It fell off towards the end.
Except he really wanted to write Strange's wife. And he kind of character assassinated Adam Strange.
Didn't he also write a Mr. Miracle series?
That one was okay. Remember, Strange Adventures is the one where you have Mr. Terrific actually not liking his kid and wishing he never had kids.
Oh, yeah.
That's where that came from, J-Heat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And Max says DC hates money. Yes, if DC liked money, we get the Snyderverse back. But no, they don't like money. And there you go. It's really, it's sad because if Wonder Woman has this place of prominence in the DC universe, why doesn't DC act like it? It's kind of odd and oddly hypocritical. So I am looking forward to seeing DC's fall, and it'll be interesting to see that. But so I think that's a good place to leave it. So J-Heat, why don't you let the audience know where they can find you and what you got coming on your channel?
As for me, you can find me at JHeat75 or JHeat Blaze. We're on our way to 300 subscribers, so I am truly thankful to get to this point. Also, I actually have a few things coming out. The Damian Wayne retrospective, I've been pushing that back for a while. Also a Penguin review of the Penguin show. I've been pushing back because of the holiday. And then hopefully Monday night, if nothing else happens, episodes 2 and 3 of the English dub for Dragon Ball Daima.
As for me, in about, it's 7 o'clock now. So in 2 hours at 9 o'clock Eastern time, Britt and I will be doing Super Wonder Legacy episode 77, where we compare Superman and Wonder Woman to Hawkman and Hawkwoman / Hawkgirl. I know it's really complicated, but then again, the Hawks are very complicated. And Wonder Woman Wednesday is going to be on what Wonder Woman means to me as a character. And yeah, so far that's what I got. So if there's no other comments, stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod. And Steve Trevor, Steve Never. He belongs 6 feet in the ground. Zois and Max about for life. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.